She was left for dead in the wilderness, as if her life meant nothing. But an Apache warrior saw something in her no one else did, and taught her that even from the ashes, the strongest love can bloom. Subscribe to the channel and listen to this beautiful story. The cracked mirror reflected a face Eleanor Whitmore no longer recognized. 26 years old, unmarried, ugly, according to the malicious tongues of Mesilla. A blemish on the family's reputation, a burden weighing on her father's shoulders like a millstone around his neck. She ran her fingers over the purple marks on her neck, a reminder of the last beating she'd taken from her younger brother. James was only 22, but he'd run the household since their father started drinking too much. To him, Eleanor was just another mouth to feed, a walking disgrace that drove away suitors from her younger sisters. "You're leaving tomorrow," James said, not looking up from his newspaper. "Colonel Harrison needs someone to look after his children at the fort. You'll do." Eleanor swallowed the lump in her throat. She knew this day would come. She'd always known. Ever since she was little, when her mother died, giving birth to her fourth daughter, she had become the family's shadow, the one who cooked, washed, sewed, the one who never complained, never cried out loud, never truly existed. "What if I don't want to?" The words escaped before she could stop them. James looked up. The hatred in his eyes was real, cutting. "You don't have a choice. You never did." That night, Eleanor packed her few belongings in a thick canvas bag. 2 mended dresses, her mother's Bible, a locket holding a faded photograph. It was all she owned in the world. 26 years of life summarized in a bag that fit in one hand. Fort Harrison was a 3-day journey through Apache territory, a dangerous region where the war between whites and Indians left trails of blood in the sand. But to Eleanor, it was just another prison, another place where she would be invisible, where she would care for other people's children while her own dreams rotted like forgotten fruit. The wagon swayed under the merciless September sun of 1873. The coachman, a grizzled man named Murphy, didn't speak much. He just spat tobacco into the sand and grumbled about the dangers of the road. "We shouldn't have come this way," he said on the second day, looking at the distant mountains. "The Apache have been restless. They say Geronimo is loose in these lands." Eleanor didn't answer. What could she say? That she preferred to die at the hands of Indians than live another day as a ghost. It was when they spotted the smoke that they knew something was wrong. The fort had been attacked the night before. The palisades were burned, the soldiers' bodies scattered like broken dolls. Women and children, dead or taken. Colonel Harrison lay face down on the earth with 3 arrows in his back. Murphy went white as a sheet. "We need to go back, now." But it was too late. They emerged from the rocks like desert phantoms. 5 Apache warriors, painted for war, their faces marked by fury. Murphy tried to grab his rifle, but an arrow pierced his chest before he could even raise the weapon. Eleanor froze. For the first time in her life, someone was looking at her. Really looking. Not with contempt or indifference, but with something she couldn't decipher. Curiosity, hatred, or just the coldness of one who decides between life and death. The leader of the group was young, perhaps her age, tall, with broad shoulders and scars that told stories of many battles. His black hair was held back with feathers and beads, and his eyes were darker than any Eleanor had ever seen. Eyes that seemed to see through her, as if they saw all the years of pain and humiliation. He said something in Apache to the others. Eleanor didn't understand the words, but she sensed the tone of command. He was a born leader, someone others followed without question. "Please," she whispered, her voice trembling. I didn't do anything wrong." The warrior tilted his head, studying her. His eyes swept over her simple dress, her calloused hands, her face marked by beatings. There was something there he recognized, a familiar pain, a suffering that spoke the same language as his own. The other warriors awaited his decision. Eleanor could feel the tension in the air, the smell of fear mixed with dried blood. She closed her eyes, expecting the final blow. Instead, she felt a strong hand take her arm. When she opened her eyes, the warrior was right in front of her. Up close, she could see the war paint on his face, the scars on his hands, the contained strength in every movement. He pulled her from the wagon without violence, but with firmness. "Nantan," he said, tapping his own chest. Eleanor blinked, confused. I'm Eleanor." He repeated the name with difficulty, transforming the syllables into something new, strange. Then he pointed to the desert. "Come." It wasn't a request. It was an order. Eleanor looked back one last time. Murphy was dead, the wagon looted, her few belongings scattered in the sand. Everything she knew, everything she was, had vanished in minutes. Nantan pulled her again, more gently this time. There was something in his eyes she couldn't understand. It wasn't pity, it was recognition, as if they saw a reflection of himself in her. The walk through the desert was long and silent. The other warriors went ahead, alert, while Nantan walked beside Eleanor. She stumbled over rocks, unaccustomed to the uneven terrain, but he always caught her before she fell. The sun was setting when they reached the camp. It was larger than Eleanor had imagined. Dozens of teepees scattered in a clearing, protected by tall rocks. Women cooked around campfires, children played in the sand, old men smoked pipes and told stories. A whole life she had never known. But her arrival caused a stir. The women stopped cooking. The children hid behind their mothers. The men grabbed their weapons, suspicious. Eleanor felt the weight of all those stares, the hostility that rose from the air like desert heat. An elderly woman approached. Her hair was white as snow, and deep wrinkles told decades of wisdom and suffering. She spoke to Nantan in a harsh voice, clearly displeased. Eleanor didn't need to understand the words to know what was being discussed. She was an intruder, an enemy, a white woman in an Apache camp, brought by one of their most respected warriors. Nantan responded calmly, but Eleanor could feel the tension in his voice. He was defending his decision to bring her, but it wasn't easy. Other men joined the discussion, some clearly against her presence. A child threw a rock at Eleanor. It stung, but not as much as the look of hatred on the girl's face. It was a hatred she knew well, the same she saw in her brother's eyes, her neighbors, everyone who considered her a nuisance. But Nantan placed himself in front of her. He said something firm, authoritative. The other men backed down, but Eleanor could see that the matter was far from resolved. She was a stranger here, a threat, a problem that needed to be solved. Nantan led her to a small teepee, away from the others. It was simple, with only a few animal skins on the ground and few belongings. He pointed to a corner, indicating where she could sleep. "Stay," he said, "safe." Eleanor nodded, not knowing what else to do. When he left, leaving her alone, she finally allowed the tears to fall. She wasn't crying for the family that rejected her, nor for the uncertain future. She was crying because, for the first time in her life, someone had chosen her. Someone had fought for her, had risked his own standing to protect her, even without understanding why. Outside, she heard the voices from the camp. Discussions, decisions being made about her fate. She knew many wanted her to leave, or worse. But she also knew Nantan wouldn't let anything happen to her. There was something in those dark eyes she recognized. The same pain she carried, the same loneliness she knew so well. Two wounded spirits who found each other in the middle of nowhere. When the moon appeared in the sky, Nantan returned. He brought food in a clay bowl, dried meat, roots, and something that looked like porridge. Eleanor was starving, but she hesitated. Would it be safe to accept? He noticed her hesitation and tasted the food first, showing there was no danger. Then he handed her the bowl. Eleanor ate slowly, savoring the strange but nourishing taste. Nantan sat on the other side of the teepee, watching her in silence. It wasn't an invasive or threatening gaze. It was careful, protective. "Why?" she asked finally. Why did you bring me? Nantan took a long time to answer. When he did, it was in a mix of broken English and gestures. You, alone, like me. Eleanor felt a tightening in her chest. That was it. He had seen in her what she had always tried to hide, the deep loneliness, the pain of never belonging anywhere, of always being the stranger, the rejected one. Your family? She asked. Nantan's face hardened. For a moment she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he began to speak, slowly, mixing English and Apache, using gestures when words failed. His village had been attacked by soldiers 3 years earlier. Men, women, children, all dead. He had only managed to escape because he was hunting far from the village when the attack happened. He returned to find only ashes and blood. Since then, he said, touching his chest, here, cold, empty, until... He stopped, looking directly at Eleanor. Until when? Until you. Eleanor felt her heart quicken. It wasn't a declaration of love. It was simpler and deeper than that. It was recognition. His loneliness had found an echo in her loneliness. Me too, she whispered, always cold in here. They sat in silence, feeling the truth settle between them like golden dust in the desert air. When they returned to the camp in the late afternoon, something had changed. Eleanor walked differently, her head held a little higher, and Nantan, who always kept his distance from everyone, now walked beside her as if it were natural. But the truce was short-lived. That night a young warrior named Kuruk confronted Nantan before the entire tribe. He was tall and strong, with war scars painted on his face. His eyes blazed with anger when he looked at Eleanor. "You brought an enemy home," he shouted in Apache, but Eleanor understood the tone. "She is not an enemy," Nantan replied, placing himself between Kuruk and Eleanor. "She's a white woman, daughter of those who killed our brothers." The discussion escalated quickly. Other warriors joined, some supporting Kuruk, others remaining neutral. Eleanor cowered, feeling the weight of all the hostile stares. It was then that Itza stood up. The old woman walked to the center of the circle, her authority silencing everyone. She spoke for long minutes in Apache, her voice laden with wisdom and authority. Eleanor didn't understand the words, but she knew she was being judged. When Itza finished, there was a heavy silence. Then she turned to Eleanor and spoke in broken English. "You want to stay with our people?" Eleanor swallowed hard. She knew this was her only chance. "Yes. Why? You have people, a place to return to." "No," Eleanor said, her voice gaining strength. "They were never my people. They never wanted me." Itza studied her face for long seconds. "Prove it." "How?" 3 moons. You live as us. Work as us. If you survive, if you show value, you can stay. If not..." She made a cutting gesture with her hand. Eleanor nodded, knowing she had no choice. "I accept." Kuruk protested furiously, but Itza silenced him with a look. The decision was made. Eleanor would have 3 months to prove she deserved a place among the Apache. When the meeting dispersed, Nantan approached her. "You don't have to do this," he said. "I can..." "No," Eleanor interrupted him. "I need to do this for myself." He looked at her with surprise, then with something that could be pride. "It will be difficult. I know. Itza will not make it easy for you. I don't expect her to." Nantan nodded, respecting her determination. "Then I teach. Everything you need to know." The days that followed were the hardest Eleanor had ever lived. Itza woke her before dawn and put her to work, fetching water from the distant stream, preparing animal skins, gathering firewood, cooking for the tribe. Her hands, already calloused from working in her father's house, bled from the new efforts. Her back ached from carrying heavy baskets, her feet blistered from walking in the hot sand. But she didn't complain, not once. Nantan taught her in her free time how to track animals, how to recognize poisonous plants, how to make fire without matches, how to move silently through the desert. He was patient, but demanding. When she made a mistake, he made her try again, and again until she got it right. "Why is it so important?" she asked one afternoon, after failing for the 10th time to start a fire. Because it can save your life, he replied simply. Here, not knowing, is dying. Eleanor understood. It wasn't just about proving her worth to the tribe. It was about surviving in a world that didn't forgive weakness. Slowly, something began to change in her. Her movements became surer. Her eyes learned to read the desert's signs. Her voice gained firmness when she spoke to the other women, and Nantan noticed. One night, when she managed to start a fire on the first try, he smiled, a true smile that completely transformed his face. Good, he said. Very good. Eleanor felt a wave of warmth in her chest. It wasn't just approval, it was pride. He was proud of her, but not everyone was happy with her progress. Kuruk remained hostile, always looking for ways to humiliate her. He would knock over the water buckets she carried. He spread rumors that she was a spy for the soldiers. He made cruel jokes about her appearance. One morning, he went too far. Eleanor was washing clothes in the stream when he appeared with two other warriors. They started speaking in Apache, laughing and pointing at her. Then Kuruk approached and knocked the basket of clothes into the water. Oops, he said in English, smiling cruelly. Eleanor froze for a second, watching hours of work disappear downriver. Then something inside her broke, not from despair, but from rage. She stood up slowly, staring Kuruk directly in the eyes. Pick it up, she said, pointing to the clothes in the water. Kuruk laughed. White woman doesn't tell me what to do. Pick it up, Eleanor repeated, her voice firmer. Kuruk's smile vanished. Others had gathered to watch the confrontation. Eleanor could feel all eyes on her, but she didn't back down. Kuruk took a step towards her, trying to intimidate her. Eleanor didn't move. You're worthless, he hissed. Nantan will get tired of you, then you'll leave, or die. Maybe, Eleanor said. But today, you pick up the clothes. The tension in the air was palpable. Kuruk was about to do something violent when a firm voice interrupted them. Problem! It was Nantan. He had arrived silently, as he always did. But there was something different about his posture, a dangerous coldness in his eyes. Kuruk hesitated. Even though he was a respected warrior, he knew he couldn't face Nantan in a fight. Just playing with your woman, he said, but there was nervousness in his voice. It's not playing, Nantan said, approaching. It's cowardice. The word dropped like a stone in the water. Cowardice was the worst accusation one could make against an Apache warrior. Kuruk turned red with anger, but he couldn't respond. Doing something against Eleanor now would be admitting Nantan was right. He spat on the ground and walked away with his companions, but Eleanor could see in his eyes that this wasn't over. Nantan turned to her. You okay? Eleanor nodded, still trembling with adrenaline. She had defended herself. For the first time in her life, she had looked her aggressor in the eye and hadn't backed down. You did right, Nantan said. Cannot show fear. Here, fear is invitation to attack. They collected the clothes in silence, working side by side. When they finished, Nantan lightly touched Eleanor's arm. You changed, he said. How so? Before, you, small, hidden. Now, he searched for the right words. Now you hear, real. Eleanor knew what he meant. For the first time in her life, she truly existed. She was no longer a shadow, an invisible woman. She was Eleanor, and she was fighting for her place in the world. But the threats were far from over. That same night, news arrived that would change everything. A messenger ran to the camp, breathless, his eyes wide with fear. Soldiers, many soldiers, marching towards the camp. And at their head, according to the messenger, was a man Eleanor knew all too well, James Whitmore, her brother. He had come to get her. Eleanor stood up when she heard her brother's name. For a moment, the world seemed to spin backward. James, here, with soldiers. Her first reaction was pure panic. The old fear buried deep in her soul returned like an avalanche. Her hands trembled, her legs weakened. She was the same frightened girl, ready to hide, to obey, to accept any punishment. But then she looked at Nantan. He watched her intently, without judgment. In his eyes was something she had never seen before, trust. He believed in her, believed in the woman she had become. "You don't have to go," he said softly. "I know," Eleanor replied, and realized it was true. For the first time in her life, she had a choice. The camp exploded into activity. Warriors ran to grab their weapons. Women began to hide children and belongings. In minutes, the entire tribe was prepared for war or flight. Itza approached Eleanor, her eyes hard as stone. "They come for you," the old woman said. "You brought trouble to us." Eleanor could have apologized, could have bowed her head as she always did. Instead, she faced Itza directly. "I didn't ask him to come," she said, "but I will handle this." "How?" "I'll talk to him." Kuruk, who was nearby, scoffed. "Talk? He brought soldiers. He wants to kill us." "Then I'll stop him," Eleanor said, her voice firm as rock. "You?" Kuruk laughed louder. "Weak woman, you will stop soldiers?" Eleanor turned to him slowly. There was something new in her eyes, something that made Kuruk stop laughing. "I am no longer the woman you knew," she said. "And if you can't see that, that's your problem." The silence that followed was heavy. Everyone could feel the change in her straight posture, her firm voice, her direct gaze. This was no longer the frightened woman Nantan had brought from the desert. "I will go with you," Nantan said. "No." Eleanor touched his arm gently. "This is my responsibility." "Eleanor, trust me." Nantan studied her for long seconds. Then he nodded slowly. "Always trusted." Eleanor took one of the tribe's horses and rode alone to meet the soldiers. Her heart beat fast, but not from fear. It was anticipation. Finally, she was going to face her past head-on. She found them in a clearing 2 miles from the camp, 20 cavalry soldiers, armed and in battle formation. In their midst, James Whitmore rode a black horse, wearing an expensive suit that looked out of place in the desert. When he saw her approaching, he smiled. It was the same cruel smile Eleanor had known since childhood. "Eleanor," he said, his voice sweet as poisoned honey. "My dear sister." Eleanor stopped her horse a few yards away. She studied her brother with new eyes. She saw the greed in his eyes, the ill-concealed impatience, the contempt he tried to hide behind false concern. "James," she said simply, "you can't imagine how worried I was when I heard about the fort attack," he continued. "I thought I'd lost you forever." "Lie." The word came out so directly, so certainly, that James blinked in surprise. "Eleanor, why did you come?" She interrupted him. "And don't lie. You never cared about me before." James hesitated. For the first time, he seemed unsure. He looked at the soldiers around him, as if seeking support. "I'm your brother," he said finally. "It's my duty to—" "Stop." Eleanor dismounted, walking towards him. "I said don't lie." There was something in her voice, an authority James had never heard before. Eleanor had always been the submissive sister, the one who obeyed without questioning. This woman was different. "Uncle Harold died," he said finally, the words coming out reluctantly. Eleanor felt a cold shock. Uncle Harold was her mother's brother, the only relative who had always been kind to her. "When?" "Last month. Left a will." Eleanor waited, knowing there was more. "He left the farm to you," James said, anger seeping into his voice. "Everything. The land, the cattle, the money, all to the spinster niece he always pitied." Now Eleanor understood. James hadn't come to save her. He had come to claim an inheritance. "And if I'm dead, you inherit everything," she said. "Eleanor, don't think that. You lied to the soldiers," she continued, her voice gaining strength. "You said I was kidnapped, that I needed to be rescued, but in truth you want me to come back to sign papers, to hand everything over to you." James turned red with anger. "That money should be mine. I'm a man. I take care of the family." "What family?" Eleanor laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. "You threw me out of the house, treated me like dirt my whole life. You're my sister. You have obligations. No, Eleanor said, and the word echoed in the desert like thunder. I have no obligation to you. You're coming back with me, James said, the mask of civility finally falling. You're going to sign the papers and give me what's rightfully mine. What if I don't want to? James smiled coldly and motioned to the soldiers. They aimed their weapons at Eleanor. It's not a choice. Eleanor looked at the rifles pointed at her. A month ago, she would have knelt, begging for forgiveness. Now, she stood firm. You point your weapons at me, she said loudly, so everyone could hear. But you also point them at Apache land, and the Apache do not like armed intruders on their land. Don't give me ridiculous threats, James said. They're just savages. Look around. James frowned. Then his eyes widened. They had appeared silently, like desert ghosts. 50 Apache warriors, hidden among the rocks, in the trees, behind bushes. All armed, all pointing at the soldiers. Nantan was in the center, mounted on his warhorse, painted for battle. His eyes met Eleanor's across the distance, and she saw pride there, pride and love. My God, whispered one of the soldiers. How? James was pale as paper. You don't understand, Eleanor said. They are not my captors. They are my family. Family? James spat the word. Your family is us, your blood. Blood doesn't make family, Eleanor said. Love does, respect does, care does. She turned to the soldiers. Lower your weapons, she shouted. You don't need to die for him. The captain of the soldiers, a grizzled man, hesitated. He could see they were clearly outnumbered. The Apache had them perfectly surrounded. Miss, he said, we are soldiers of the American army. We have orders to... Your orders were based on a lie, Eleanor said. He said I was kidnapped. I am not. I am here by choice. Eleanor, James shouted. Stop this madness. You're a civilized white woman. You can't live with savages. Why not? The simple question caught him off guard. Because you're better than that. Better? Eleanor laughed, a genuine sound this time. They've treated me better in 2 months than you have in 26 years. They're Indians, and I'm the woman you kicked like a dog, the one you beat when you were angry, the one you humiliated in front of everyone. Eleanor took a step towards him. Tell me, James, who's the savage here? James was speechless. The soldiers looked at him with increasing discomfort, beginning to understand the true situation. I'm staying, Eleanor said, with my husband. Husband? James looked punched. Nantan, the man who saved me when you left me to die. You can't. This is crazy. What will people say? The right people will say I finally found where I belong. Eleanor turned to the soldier's captain. Captain, you seem like an honorable man. Answer me a question. If an adult woman freely chooses where she wants to live and with whom she wants to live, does the army have the right to force her to do otherwise? The captain hesitated. It was a difficult question, especially with 50 Apache warriors pointing weapons at his men. Well, if she's not being coerced... I am not being coerced, Eleanor said firmly. I am making a free choice. She's my sister, James yelled. She can't make this decision alone. Why not? Eleanor stared at him. Because I'm a woman? Because I've always been your property? Because you're sick? No sane person would choose to live with Indians. Then I'm sick, Eleanor said. Sick of being treated as nothing, sick of living in the shadows, sick of having no voice or will. She walked to the horse and mounted again. But I'm not that woman anymore, she said. That woman died in the desert. This woman chooses her own life. James was desperate. He could see the inheritance slipping through his fingers. If you don't come back, he said, you'll never be welcome in the family again. Eleanor smiled, a sad but liberated smile. James, I was never welcome in the family. The difference is, now I don't care anymore. She turned her horse to leave, but stopped to say one last thing. James, I hope the inheritance is worth it, because that's the price you paid for the only true family you had. With that, she galloped back to the Apache camp. Behind her, she heard James shouting orders, the soldiers reluctantly regrouping to leave, the sound of an entire life being left behind. When she arrived at the camp, the entire tribe awaited her. Eleanor dismounted and walked to the center of the circle. She knew this was the moment of truth. Itza approached, her eyes studying Eleanor intently. "You chose," the old woman said. "I chose. Even knowing you can't go back." "There was never anything to go back to," Eleanor said. "Only forward." Itza nodded slowly. Then, to everyone's surprise, she smiled. "Then welcome to the family, daughter." The word daughter fell upon Eleanor like rain in the desert. For the first time in her life, someone called her daughter with love, with acceptance. She fell to her knees, not from weakness, but from relief. The tears came, but they were tears of liberation. Nantan approached and knelt beside her. He touched her face tenderly. "You strong," he said, "stronger than I thought. You taught me to be strong." "No, you always were. Just needed to wake up." Eleanor looked around. She saw the women who once rejected her now smiling at her. She saw the warriors who despised her now nodding with respect. She saw children running towards her, fearless. "Nantan," she said. "Yes? Will you teach me to make a real home?" He smiled, and it was like the sun rising on the horizon. "We make together." The months that followed were the happiest of Eleanor's life. She learned to speak Apache fluently. She learned to hunt, to heal wounds with herbs, to tell stories around the campfire. She learned to be part of something bigger than herself. And she fell in love. It wasn't sudden passion, but a love that grew slowly, like desert plants, difficult yet deep, resilient. A love built on trust, day by day, on mutual respect, on silent care. Nantan also changed. The solitary warrior learned to smile, to share his fears, to trust that there was a future beyond war. Eleanor had awakened in him not just love, but hope. When they married the following spring, it was in a simple but profound ceremony. Eleanor wore a dress she had sewn herself, mixing white fabrics with Apache beads and feathers. Nantan had painted his face with symbols of protection and eternity. Itza conducted the ceremony, her words echoing in the desert. "You both came from places of pain," she said, "but you found healing in each other. May this union be strong as the mountains and flexible as the wind." When Eleanor said yes, her voice echoed clear and firm. There was no hesitation, no fear, only certainty. Kuruk, who had become one of Eleanor's most loyal friends after she saved his daughter from a snakebite, laughed loudly and shouted, "Now you are truly one of us." And Eleanor laughed too, because it was true. She belonged. For the first time in her life, she truly belonged. A year later, as she held her newborn daughter in her arms, a girl with dark eyes like her father and golden hair like her mother, Eleanor looked out at the horizon where she had once walked, lost and desperate. "What shall we call her?" Nantan asked, touching the tiny face of the baby. Eleanor thought of everything she had lived through, all the tears and all the pain that had brought her there. "Esperanza," she said. "We'll call her Esperanza." Nantan smiled. "It's perfect." And it was. Because this child, born of love between two worlds, was living proof that miracles can be born from pain, that courage can bloom in the desert, and that every invisible woman carries within her the power to be reborn. Eleanor Whitmore had died that day in the desert. In her place, a free woman was born.